Damos comienzo al siguiente acto.
We're going to start the next session, the history future of the actions and vindication of the citizenship organized to recover and socialize memory. What we still have to do. The moment where we are cannot be understood without the intervention of the memorialist movement, which over the laws, the wrongly named amnesty law and other ones that are insufficient, they have been insisting so that the three main pillars of memory are complete with truth, justice and reparation. We are 4 people in this panel, apart from me, the moderator. Andrés is here and he will be coming, or maybe he's in the other room, and when he comes he will sit next to us. But we're going to start with another of the people who are here, Isidoro Coello Infantes. He's the president of the Grenadian Association of Truth, Justice and Reparation, a member of the Sociocultural Association La Desbandá, member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party in Spain, and responsible for historical memory of the Communist Party of Andalusia. The name of his speech is Memorialist Movement of La Desbandá. Good afternoon. Well, my presentation is going to be based on what happened since the beginning. This memorialist fight focused on the recovery of the memory of this episode of the War of Spain, La Desbandá. I'm going to focus on the intellectual scope and also the scope of civil activity in the fight for the recovery of these memories. When it comes to the intellectual side of it, we can refer to research on the Road of Death, National 340, by Encarnación and Lucía Prieto. These are reflected in their book, Population and Civil War in Malaga, Full Exodus and Refuge, or the one by Jesús Majadeneda and Fernando Pérez Bueno, that go to the collective memory through the book Road, Malaga, Almería, February 1937. Those are one of the first publications that started regarding the research done on the crimes of this death road. This research is very important, and also the documentary The Death Road in Malaga 1937. It's the first documentary that was done on the victims of this road, and it's based on the testimonies of survivors of La Desbandá. And we think that was very important and essential in the process of dissemination on what happened and getting to know it straight from the testimonies of survivors. Juan Madrid is the director of this documentary. At the beginning of the memorialist social activism, like the civil society organized in different associations, we started to act towards the recovery of this memory, and we had to focus on Malaga. Vélez Málaga, more precisely through the Forum for the Memory of the Exarchy, and other villages of the province of Malaga. Among them, it's important to see what the memorialist colleagues of Arenas did. That's when they organized the first actions. They were in marches at the weekend. I remember those Vélez Málaga to Torre del Mar, and with respect to what the Forum for the Memory of Axarquía and the colleagues of Vélez Málaga, we have to mention the tribute that was done to the survivors of the death road. This was done annually up to the arrival of the pandemic, and that was organized by the Forum for the Memory of Axarquí, and the place of tribute was the Exilium Center of Maria Zambrano in Vélez, Málaga. I want to highlight the importance in the activist fight for the memory of the province of Malaga, because that was the beginning. That was in February 2005 when they asked for our help to start to act, and in the province of Granada the first vindication marches started in February 2005, establishing then the first march of La Desbandá. These marches were between Almuñécar, Salobreña and Motril, and also the entrance of the National 348 to Almería. These marches were organized for the weekend in different places every weekend, and these memorials of the coast took place, and this year it was the 17th edition of them. Since 2017, this memorial march in the coast of Granada was part of those organized by the association La Desbandá in this integral march between Malaga and Almería. That is to say, even if it's organized in the Granadian coast, it's one of the stages of the comprehensive march between Malaga and Almería. We value the repercussion of these marches. At the beginning, it was very poor. We have to acknowledge that at the beginning it had no effect because they were not visible. They were very local. They did it in certain populations, one year and the next one. But sometimes not even the people in villages knew what was happening. This changed from 2012. The coalition government of the Socialist Party and the Democratic Memory Association was created with Luis Naranjo Cordobés at the head of it. This non-institutional change had very positive consequences, and particularly for the vindication of the memory of the victims of La Desbandá. Between 2012 and 2015, something very important for the memorialist community is the signaling of places of memory. Those of you who are Andalusian, you know that in the whole of the autonomous community, they signaled only at that time, because when the government was broken, they still have this democratic memory direction, but they never placed signs in those places. At that time, they signaled, for example, the old provincial jail, the women's jail, San Rafael, the Malaga's cathedral, where the place where this C3 submarine sunk, the lighthouse, the Park of the Memory in Torre del Mar, and a square in Nerja. If you come from Malaga, you know that these places have a sign, and that's what we do every year when we are in this hold comprehensive march. We organize some tribute, and the one which is Anselmo was the lighthouse. Was the one who worked in the lighthouse, and with these with these actions, he saved a lot of lives. The lighthouse was very close from the coast, and it was surrounded by sugar canes. And at night, the people that came running away from Malaga used it as a refuge. And the cruises, Baleares, and the fascist Italian ships used the lighthouse as a reference point to bomb them. These men turned it off. As they told me, the ships were continued sailing, and they bombed other places. And with these actions of Anselmo, he saved a lot of lives, but he was also shot because of these next to the walls of the cemetery. In the province of Granada, we can also highlight as the signaling of memory one of the most mythical places that we have in the memorialist march of La Desbandá, in the integrated one. The the exit of the river Guadalfeo. We've chosen that for two reasons, because it's virtually in the middle of the way. It's in Salobreña, and also because it's one of the places where many people died. The river Guadalfeo had a very high. It was a very high flow river, and the bridge was so weak, and it got blocked with the trucks that went out to Nerja and the ones that came from Almería. And this blockage made it impossible to cross, and they could feel the Italian shooting. So many people tried to cross the river, and on the next day there were many victims on the beach of Salobreña. And this is one of the reasons why it's being signed as a memory place, a place of memory. But La Desbandá, in its last stage last year, we could place a monolith, which is a tribute to the victims. And, you know, hopefully when we get there in February, we can continue to enjoy it. In Granada, there's also another place of Franco repression, which is a provincial prison. They tore it down. We just have the door with the arc in there. You have the Republican shield, and so the one which is on top of it, it's the it's a shield of the Republic In Almería, we signaled the anti-aerial refugees and Mauthausen Memorial. We can also mention the opening of a walk in Malaga, and after the appointment of Luis Naranjo in Motril, we inaugurated a statue, and the association took part in it, but we have to say that the merit belonged to the Memorialist Association, 14 de Abril, 14th of April, but at least we helped with our presence when it was inaugurated. The Canadienses Walk, Paseo de los Canadienses, we did it with the help of a Canadian trade union, and they helped economically, thanks to which we could inaugurate and open this Paseo de los Canadienses. For this reason, we can highlight the importance of the direction of democratic memory at that time, with the implication of Luis Naranjo, of course, and Juan Francisco Arenas, who were leading that direction. They organized the institutional part of it and institutional vindications that were made on the road. So civil population took part in it, but at that time it was a democratic direction that helped a lot and organized the acts for the recovery of the memory of the victims of La Desbandá. And with that, in this period, we were much more visible than what we had been before. With the rupture of the coalition government in Andalusia, it was again the civil society, the one which had to organize all of the acts for the recovery of the victims' memory. There was a platform with which several memorial organizations took part from Malaga, Granada, and Almería, and this platform is the one in charge of organizing the needed actions to continue to recover this memory. In 2007, the Andalusian Mountain Federation, thanks to their provincial subdelegate in Granada, Rafael Morales Domínguez, he got in touch with those responsible of the platform, and more precisely, he talked to me. That's why I know that Rafael helped with connecting with this association in the process of recovery of the memory. The federation organized this hiking act, and the other organizations that were part of that platform were in charge of organizing the memorialist acts. So that's how the first comprehensive march of La Desbandá was born. That was very, had a lot of effect in the media. That year, they started talking about this in a qualitative and quantitative way. What happened in this first march? Well, not everything was nice, or there were problems, because many of the people who came to walk, they did it focusing on the sportive side of it. It was just like hiking. They didn't stand that there were Republican flags or flags belonging to different organizations. I remember that when we got to Salobreña, there were people coming out of the village to welcome us, and we were obliged to hide the flags of the political party Izquierda Unida, a left party. What happened? What did this bring about? Well, we thought that maybe on the second stage, the Mountain Federation would not participate. So we created the La Desbandá Sports Club, in which a good number of organizations that belong to the platform are included: Málaga Republicana, the Forum for the Memory of Axarquía, Truth, Justice and Reparation, the Left Party, DGT. That is to say, many organizations that were involved in the first project of La Desbandá, which was the hiking club La Desbandá. And then we created the second comprehensive march. That was very successful, not only because of the number of participants, but people who took part in it were not only Andalusian. We started to receive other participants from all communities. We have Catalonian people from the Basque Country, like our poet Silvia Delgado Fuente, and many more that I cannot see now. That's why it was successful. So the topic of La Desbandá and the recovery of the memory goes out of the Andalusian community. And why? Because, as we have said in many of our speeches, those exiled ended up everywhere in the country. We've had French people that are the relatives of somebody who was part of La Desbandá, for example, and they ended up in France. So after the second march, several people involved in it talked about the necessity to see that the work done was not, just sports related. So they proposed the creation of a memorialist association. In this sense, some associations of the ones that were part of the club, we had the doubt of the need to organize another association. And after much debate, on the 26th of June 2018, we signed the Funding Act, and we have the Sociocultural Association La Desbandá, which up to these days organizing all acts related to La Desbandá and this association, among which we have to highlight also these comprehensive marches, but the first international meeting of La Desbandá, which was organized in Bícar 2020. That was a prelude of what we're doing today. So it was an attempt to see what we were able to do. We had COVID and we had to organize it online. We were not sure about what to do, but we decided to move forward, and we can say that we are quite satisfied with the result. Also, the participation on some memorialist marches, La Desbandá doesn't only want to be that association, that talks about what happened between Málaga and Almería. We propose that all of those marches that have as its aim the recovery of the memory, La Desbandá should be part of it. So I want to take advantage of saying now that we have some partners sheets that you can. It's 15 euros a year. It's not very expensive. And maybe if you feel like it, maybe you can sign those pages and hand them in. Yeah, we took part in Jarama, in the Jarama March, in the last march between Bizna and Alfacar, an homage to the victims of the Franco system that suffered torture and they were in jail, and the more than 40,000 shot next to the wall of the cemetery of Canela. Those are the places where La Desbandá and the association participates. And we also have to highlight some informative talks that are vital in its importance for the creation of the association, things that have been done in different institutes, different high schools for students, and how not to mention the organization of one of the most important events currently, which is related to the memory and this first international conference, La Desbandá, 1 century of anti-fascist fight of the Spanish people. Regarding the intellectual aspect, currently there are several works, and one of the aims of this conference is to unify the different research and different investigations that are being carried out, to contrast and compare them with the ones that we had from before. In the field of research, it's essential the work done by other researchers, also Andrés Fernández Martín, María Isabel Brenes, Sánchez. They have both participated here. Andrés yesterday and Maribel was here today, this morning. And that is reflected in the book 1937, Exodus, Málaga, Almería. And we also have to comment on the studies and the work of Eusebio Rodríguez Padilla and Juan Francisco Colomina Sánchez in the book La Desbandá of Málaga in the province of Almería, and Frank Martín and Sonia Cervantes in its book The War in My Eyes, La Guerra en Mis Ojos, that takes us to the story of Ana Pomares that we talked about before, survival of La Desbandá, and we could hear her talk. And in the last March, she talked about her experiences and everything that happened. What is our main objective? To finish, we want to get truth, justice and reparation, as many of the other speakers said. To achieve that, it is vitally important to work on the investigation of the facts and bring it to the from the selective memory of the researcher to the collective memory of society. And it's vitally important, this moment of memory, organizing acts with the aim of having the truth out there, and that there is justice, and that if possible we can repair the damage done to victims and their relatives. This is all. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you so much, Isidoro. Our next speaker on the panel will be Severiano Montero. He's been working as a professor and also in secondary education in several high schools in Madrid and school in London. Among his publications, we have The Story of Civilizations, The Landscape of War, New Itineraries in the Fronts of Madrid, and The Battle of Brunete. And he's also prepared the edition of 2 books. He's been a voluntary of Freedom, 50 Poems of the International Brigade, and Memory of a Rebel. And as his memorialist work, he's been the president of the Association of Friends of International Brigades. He's promoted several monuments of the International Brigades in Madrid, and also the memorialist marches of Jarama and Brunete. He's the member of the Historical Commission of the Association of Friends of the International Brigades, and also the contents, responsible for the contents of his web. He's given talks on international brigades at universities, cultural centers, and high schools. The title of his speech is the 23rd International Brigade and his support to the anti-fascist fight of the Spanish village, its existence in memory and what is still to do. You have the floor. Yes, could we have the images, please? Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Thanks to the organization of La Desbandá. You're doing a great work in this memorialist fight. You know, being a history teacher, I was somehow organizing maybe, I don't know, like a lesson that I would give to my high school students. And when I retired 14 years ago, I continued to do that in other school centers. And well, these images give us some context and what the fight was of the 13th International Brigade and the other international brigade, 6 or 7 of them that existed. But of course, we're going to focus on the 13th International Brigade. That was the one that was present in that confrontation between the fascist forces that were chasing the 200,000 or whichever figure it was of those that had fled away from fascists and were trying to walk towards freedom. And the Republican forces, the first element of clash that blocked this fascist advance was the 13th International Brigade. You know that since the beginning, when the coup took place in June, the fascist forces offered their support to the coup d'etat, to this rebellion, and they were determined that this coup would be successful, and then the dictatorship of Franco would be set up, and so it did for more than 40 years. But Spain was quite isolated because of the result of let's say, traditionally the democratic powers. And it seems like not the same thing happened in the 30s and the current times, because that behavior that we have with Ukraine is not the one that they had before. The democratic powers just retired, and they allowed the fascist troops and forces to act in a totally impune way. Spain was isolated, but not totally, because there were many young people in the world, 35,000, 40,000, maybe even more, that came to Spain to help the Spanish people to fight against fascism. And also, there was the significant intervention by the Soviet Union that gave the republic some weapons that were necessary to resist, at least for a couple of years, the fascist attack. Together with this military help of the Soviet Union, we also counted on another aid, like the Mexican one, but which was decisive and important was the use of these international mixed brigades that were formed in, that got together in Albacete, as you will know, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 150, 129. And there was also a German volunteer that said, why not remember the 86th International Brigade? Well, this would be another topic. But what's true is that in Albacete, these international brigades got together and they started to actively support the Spanish people in the defense of Madrid. They were not the ones that decided to defend Madrid, but of course they contributed to that, because their presence that was quite scarce. It was something like 2,000 volunteers, the ones that got to Madrid. They were like 1/10 or 20th of those defending Madrid, but the presence of those 2,000 international volunteers meant a great moral support, so that the village, the people in Madrid decided to defend themselves from the fascists. Later on, as you know, apart from the fact that the war ground was dragged until March of 2037, the Battle of Jarama, the Battle of the Road to Coruña. So the main weight of the war was in Madrid, but there were other fascist forces in the north and in the south, and in the south, that with their own interventions in the north to conquer the very rich industrial area of the vast country, Santander, Asturias, and in the south, we know that there was an offensive, the offensive of the Olive in December 36 on Andújar, Lopera, Jaén. That was the main objective, target, but they were blocked there, as we all know, at Christmas in the year 36 by the 14th International Brigade and the 6th Mixed Brigade, led by Miguel Gallo, and they had an important participation later on in the counter-offensive by Republicans in February that we will see in a minute. The map, you know, it's here. I've seen it in the wonderful exhibition by La Desbandá in the other room. We know and we can see that the French, Italian and Spanish troops got into Malaga, and then that race started to persecute the 200,000 or, you know, whichever figure, because we don't know for sure, those who were fleeing towards the Republican territory, Almeria. We do not have to insist on this because you know this quite well, but it's true that they had to stop in Madrid because by the 13th International Brigade. The Chapayev Battalion was the first one to get there. It got there on the 13th. They got to Agua Dulce, and Miguel Gallo, the leader of that sector, of the 6th Mixed Brigade and the sector, decided that they had to directly confront the Franco forces and troops that had conquered Motril after crossing the river Guadalfeo. And actually, they did conquer Casteldeferro, Calahonda on the 15th and the 16th. And they decided that, you know, they will say, you shall not pass. You shall not pass, no pasaréis. So they put there this iron curtain, and that stayed there. This was the Chapayev Battalion. But the fascists, when they saw that it was hard to cross that spot, because there was this wall, let's say, they tried to get through Alpujarra, going around, so that they could find a free area to operate, and also they could recover the other troops that were on the coast. So Miguel Gallo decided that Chapayev Battalion and the new battalion, the French one, Guillemin, the one that got there a little bit later, they had to place themselves in strategic points at the north and south of the Alpujarra with the aim of avoiding this fascist action strategy of reaching, moving forward through the Alpujarra. And they did it rightly. This is an interesting image that I've also seen in the exhibition. This drawing by a German, Coello, in which you can see the tragedy of La Desbandá seen by a German volunteer. And this was the Chapayev Battalion that confronted them and make the fascists turn around and make them try to look for another way to move forward. But at the skirt of Sierra Nevada and the other battalion in the Andújar mountain range were the two places where they could stop the fascists. And that's where BF stayed with some modifications, but that's where the frontier between freedom, like as Fernando Valera would say, the limit between freedom and tragedy and cruelty. We have some pictures of those volunteers that were in the area of Sierra Nevada, Pitres, Portugos, Trevelez, where this summer they organized the second Sierra Nevada March, promoted by Fernando, the mayor, and the association 14th of April. And these are images that we know very well because there is an exhibition and promoted by the mayor, as we said, on this topic, and that is going through the different villages in Andalusia and other ones outside Andalusia.
And this is the final result. The Republican front, as you can see, that's the position in the map that you all know well. The international brigades also fought in different battles. They all fought with a lot of courage, very generously, offering their blood. Out of the 35,000, 6,000 or 8,000 are buried in our land. They are part of the Spanish land now, as Hemingway said. And over 80% of them have a scar from those battles. They were wounded, and some of them suffered a lot from that. In El Canandreque battalion, in the Guadalajara battle, a Swedish soldier had a wound on his head. He lost his 2 arms, part of a leg, and he continued living in terrible conditions, and he died in 1956 when he couldn't stand anymore. But in spite of all this, he had a great dignity. In spite of this, Negrín decided to retreat the international brigades, and I'm not going to discuss whether it was a good decision or not. They were retreated in September, removed in September 1938, but I would like to refer to La Pasionaria's discourse and Negrín's speech 3 days earlier close to the monastery of the Poblet. Well, that was the speech that will mark the memories of the international brigades. I'm not going to read it, but, well, it's here. You can read it on the screen, but it's essential for you to understand the international brigades. Unfortunately, after the international brigades went back, the Second World War arrived, and it deleted the memory of the international brigades, in fact, of the fact that many of those who had fought here continued with the resistance in their own countries, also in Italy, in Germany, in Yugoslavia, and so on. The resistance in France or the one in Italy or Yugoslavia, they wouldn't have existed without the support coming from the international brigadists. In spite of everything, oblivion destroys many things, and the memory of the international brigades was destroyed in history. And then later on, in 1960, since 1940, well, 1939 to 1960, so 20 years later, there is something that reminds us this past, the solidarity of the peoples of the world with the resistance in Spain. That was a book that recovered this, and after that there were many other books, and we started talking about this in the world, but also later on in Spain, because we were still in the silence to Spain. So the topic of the international brigades was recovered, and we started discussing this in a dignified way, in a decent way. In Spain, nevertheless, we know that there are the De la Sierra books. Yes, Ricardo de la Cierva's books. And others who were saying lies during the war and after the war. But there was an exception. Andreu Castells, a Catalonian who had been member of the 129 International Brigade at the beginning. They were 100% international, but at the end of the war, 60 or 70% of the members of the international brigades were Spanish people. Most of them identified themselves with the international struggle and also, of course, with the fight by the Spanish people. So one of the things we do in ABI is that we respond when we have information requests from brigadists from Spain or from abroad, when they want to know the contribution of their grandparents or great-grandparents in Spain's war, because they did feel completely identified with those struggles, with what was being done here in Spain. So the international brigades were rediscovered during this, well, from the 60s and particularly the 70s on, and many memory associations were created throughout the world. You know, from the 70s on, 80s, 90s, the years, the decade of 2000. ABI was created in 1995, and the main task it had was to recover the memory of the freedom volunteers, as they were called, or the volunteers for freedom. First, because they wanted to comply with the promise of Mr. Negrin, saying that these volunteers deserved the Spanish nationality. And this was discussed in the Parliament in the month of December 1995, and this was approved a majority vote, only 3 votes against, and this is the result on the screen. A royal decree by our terrible king, where it is stated that they have earned the right to have the Spanish nationality. At the time, double nationality was forbidden, and then the law on historical memory by Zapatero was necessary in order to create this exception for international brigadists, so that they would have a double nationality. Also, there was the idea to create an archive with the donations by brigadists who came in '96 for the tribute that was paid to them. That was in October 1996. The most important one was in Madrid, with over 300 brigadists, but there were other tributes in other cities, in Gijón, Albacete, Valencia, Barcelona, and other municipalities. I won't mention them all, but this was of course really important. It was necessary to do this, pay this homage, pay this tribute to them. It was a key year in the memory recovery. The media recognized for the first time the role of the international brigades in the war, and that was a starting point. And then what happened after that? Well, brigadists disappeared little by little. In 2001. Less than 100 came to the events celebrated every 5 years. In 2011, 4 brigadists, and 2016, only 1. Vicente Almudever was born in Marseille, but his origins were in Valencia. And during the last tribute in 2021, no brigadists came because they had all died. Josep Almudever was the last one to die. And last year his brother died too, and he had fought in the Republican army. So what can we do now in these circumstances? We have several tasks with regards to what we need to do, and there you have our tasks on the screen. We organize tributes, we organize the archive in Albacete, we promote the creation of monuments, plaques, and have the names of brigadists on the streets. We do dissemination of history, in forums and conferences. We also inform people who are interested by this topic. Recently, there was a young student from the communication school who wanted to get information from the Polish about the Polish volunteers. 4,500 Polish volunteers. and 60% of them had a Jew origin, and the Botuin company. We also have exhibitions for those who wish to share it. Also, we have working cooperation with other memory associations like La Desbandá. We create partnerships. Also, La Desbandá is working on the coordination also of initiatives. This is very important, and this is something that needs to be done. This is still pending. And also, another task is to try to give information to the family members who ask what their family members were doing in Spain, where they went to, what battles they participated in, what happened to them. All this that is part of the family memory, but also the memory of a collective memory of Democrats, a memory that needs to be kept, of those who were oppressed and defeated, but we need to acknowledge all this, and they have the dignity to want to know. Those who fought for freedom, they didn't get that freedom. And here we have some monuments that we've created. In Moratatajuña, this was a battlefield, also in Madrid, where the international brigades fought too. Isabel Pinar, the main promoter, in Albacete, which was where the headwaters of the international brigades, Gijón, Stockholm, London. There are between 150 and 200 memorials for the international brigades in Spain. There are about 80. And it's really important to maintain this movement, to have new monuments, new streets with their names, in all those places where they had a significant role. We need to remember what they did. This to 35,000 volunteers, 52 countries, and this morning, well, I was discussing with another colleague who said, a comrade who said they were coming from over 70 countries.
Gracias, Severiano. Seguimos con la siguiente persona. Él es Andrés.
So we're going to continue with Andrés Rebolledo Barreno. He's the coordinator of the project of the mass graves of Marrufo. Can you hear me now? Okay. So the coordinator of the rehabilitation of the cemetery as a place of memory, coordinator of the House of La Sauceda since it was opened up to now. He is also someone who collaborates in all the events organized in the Forum for the Memory of the Campo de Gibraltar. Also, this is Association of Memory in different areas of places in Andalusia. He's also in charge of the visits in the Memory House of La Sauceda, and he participates in the events on memory in different places throughout Andalusia and Spain, and he's the coordinator of the exhumation in the cemetery of Jimena. Memory as social and social need. Live without backpacks. The struggle of the victims and the memorialist movement against the irresponsibility and abandonment of a state. Good afternoon to all of you. I'd like to thank Las Desbandá, the association. Sorry. Well, I'm a bit nervous, and I was afraid that would be so. So I was saying that I'd like to thank the organizers and congratulate them too for the great quality of the contents of it. I'd like to say that for me this is not a presentation and I'm not a professional speaker. And, well, I must say that I'd like to explain, in fact, my itinerary. And I'm going to use 3 PowerPoint presentations. These are the ones we use in our memory house for the people who come to visit us. And they show 3 very important moments that we've experienced during the last 12 very intense years. So first of all, the exhumation of El Marrufo, the rehabilitation of the cemetery, and the tribute we organized there, and how we moved the 28 corpses that were found to the cemetery, and also the opening of the memory house in 2016, and the process for the creation of that. And that this tool that has been so useful in order to actually reach out to the new younger generations, which is our main goal. I'd like to start sharing with you a thought I've been bearing in mind since yesterday, and this is something we've already discussed with some comrades. Encarnación said that the word Desbandá is a word she didn't like, and I think no one likes that word. And there's a very simple reason for that. And Emirta Núñez also said something before Encarnación Barrandero, and that is that there's a trend like to avoid using the terms used by Franco, the Franco regime. And as far as I know, La Desbandá is a term used by the oppressors, the people in the Franco regime. So I think this Congress should help us reflect on that, about that term. La huida, or the flight, is another term that we use, perhaps very local from the area of Campo de Gibraltar, because la huida, or the flight, was something that started months earlier, several months before La Desbandá. Since the coup d'etat and since the Campo de Gibraltar was occupied. So I wanted to share this thought with you, dear comrades, because I think that we need to rethink about this term, La Desbandá, in some way or another. Where's our colleague who's in charge with this? Okay, this is already on. Perfect, good. I couldn't see that on the screen of the computer. The title of my presentation is Memory as a Human and Social Need. My personal experience, my itinerary, starts from that need since I was really young, because I tell about this in my documentary. There's a grandfather I never met, and I had questions. And my grandmother and my mother always gave me the same answer. Your grandfather died in the war. That's it. That was an abstract idea, no details. And how can a child understand this, digest this? How did he die? Was he fighting? Was he a soldier? What did he do? And since then I had this longing. I always saw my grandmother sad in black, and Juanfra paid a wonderful tribute to my mother and my grandmother. The testimony my mother told her several years ago is going to be published in the future, and I'd like to thank for that. And that's what I was that was something I was living. I felt when I was a child. There was this need and also this lack, this absence. Something you don't really understand, like not very able to express either. And then I grew up and democracy was advancing and I started seeing some movement of the sort, and then my mother started talking about the very few things she knew, and that's where I saw that need. And that need also started it was something that she started expressing too. So she asked me and my brothers to find the death certificate of our grandfather. Her father had died when she was only 1.5 years. And as Franz said yesterday in the testimony, my grandmother said, I left my sadness in a small corner and I got up to work to be able to feed you. So that was what we experienced in our house, in our home. And then our mother suddenly asked us to try and find the death certificate of our grandfather. And of course we tried everything we could. We tried to find and check the civil registries in La Alcalá, in all the villages around, and there were no documents available, nothing in all the villages we searched. And we only found some testimonies where it was said that in the house of El Farrujo, many people had been executed. And something about some summary executions there. And that's when, well, I found the opportunity to join the memory movement. There were some sessions on the historical memory in La Jimena, and I decided to participate. And I had this name, Marrufo, in my mind, because at the time I had a human need. I absolutely needed to help my mom find information about and the remains of her father and her uncle. And that was a great session, and it was a great starting point. And the memory movement in the Campo de Gibraltar asked me to join them, and that's what I did. They appointed me their president, and my only condition was that the first project that we would be working on, and we were still with the law of Zapatero, with a call for projects, was a project on what happened in La Sauceda and El Marrufo. And well, all this. And there's a third point, but I won't refer to that yet. And all this emerges because of this backpack. And this brings me to the second point of my presentation. This is why I say living without a backpack, because why should anyone be carrying this backpack? This is something invisible, but it becomes a trauma, and it's also an invisible trauma. And what I'm trying to say with all this is that in this country there is a collective trauma, a social trauma that has not been solved. And the reason is because the state has not fulfilled its duties. And well, this invisible but so heavy backpack, that's what's pushing you to advance and achieve something at the human and the social level. And that's why I started this, embarked myself into this adventure. So the project was approved. There were many oral testimonies, many contributions by historians and researchers of the province and many different parts of Andalusia about La Sauceda and El Marufo. So the first prospections were approved. They started in 2012, and the metal detectors were beeping all the time. There were lots of bullets, projectiles from short and long guns, and we knew that we were there. And that's why we understood that several people were buried there and had been executed there. We thought perhaps up to 100. 3 mass graves were found, later on 7 as a final account, and we found 4 bodies in one of the graves and 4 limbs, lower limbs, in another one of the mass graves. So these were successful results, but exhumation was the challenge. On one part, we knew that the state was not going to accept this exhumation, that was going to be quite complex. Here we're not talking about a cemetery. These are mass graves, open air, in a farmhouse, in a cortijo, that belonged, a land that belonged to a rich man that didn't want to open the land to us. And also there's been a series of coincidences. When we presented the results of the excavations, well, someone came up saying that he knew that his grandparents had disappeared, forcibly disappeared. So his great-grandmother and his grandfather. And this was, in fact, the owner of Lotus Festina watches. So someone who had funds and resources. He wanted to contribute as another family member as anyone else, but he had the necessary resources. And well, we didn't say no straight away, but we needed to analyze this because it was a very big responsibility. We discussed this in detail and thought, well, finally we said yes. And he gave us the funds for the exhumation, also for the DNA tests, for the rehabilitation of the cemetery of La Sauceda. And also he bought the memory house.
So this joint project, that was a really huge project, because at the same time we were doing many things. But we had the energy, and we believed, and we wanted to do it, most of all because of the victims. This was our main goal, and I think it is the goal of the memory movement in general. We are seeking the truth. We want to make justice whenever it is possible, and also we want to give reparation to the victims. So this exhumation was a turning point, and it gave us strength to keep on working. We have the cemetery of La Sauceda, which becomes a memory site, and we get this designation by the regional government, and the same for the Cortijo de Marufo, which belongs to the owners of a very famous winery of the area, and also of La Sauceda. La Sauceda was not really a village, it was like an annex to a municipality that is a part of Cortes de la Frontera, but it is more important. In fact, it's bigger settlement. So there was, because of Capo de Llano, who gave the order of the aviation to bomb this village because they hadn't succeeded doing it by land. So there were there was a great number of bombings of civil society, and this is earlier than Guernica or Durango. So for us, this is the Andalusian Guernica, and nobody knows about it. So this village disappeared. And it is a magical village because it is so beautiful. And currently it is a part of the natural park of Los Alcornocales. And the people used to live very happily there. Then there was the agrarian reform. And there was a population with with a nice level of income. They had some wealthy, and they were able to own their lands, and they worked with different products that they could sell also away. So all that was destroyed by the bombings, and of course the people, the inhabitants of this village. I know I have experienced myself the consequences of that bombing, of those bombings, because my mom was widow and she had 4 children. She was dispossessed of her land and she had to leave her village and go to Castellar to keep on working very hard, working really, really hard and starving and suffering from hunger, for many needs, starting from the lack of a father, the possibility she could have to access to any kind of education, she lost it. So every day I see a TV show with my mom and she adores it. She loves playing it and she knows many answers to the questions of this quiz. And she thinks she could have been a teacher, a school teacher, but she never had a chance. And this is also a part of the trauma. Because if you don't know all this, you're not aware, but once you start to know these kind of details, you start to think about it, and you can even get obsessed. And then there's the trauma. And for me, the only tool I have is keep on fighting. My only way to get out of this trauma is keep on fighting against fascism, because I am an engaged, a committed citizen, and I think this society deserves something better, and we can do it. And now I'm going to pass to my third point, and I would like to highlight the lack of responsibility by the government. And it has always been like this since the democracy arrived to Spain. I think there is not enough political will or maturity. It is the state who has to take this responsibility, and he has to solve the problems we have in this field. And if this is not done, we will never get to be the society we deserve. And also we have to do it to pay tribute to those who lost their lives. All these people had skills and potential. There were people who had made university studies, but there were also peasants, or all kinds of persons and professionals. So this country had been really different if all these people hadn't died. We lost poets, doctors, intellectuals. We lost all the people who was supposed to be building the next republic. So all we're doing here, all the work done by the memory movement and all the people who support these initiatives, we have the same mission, the same goal. We want to get back all that was stolen from us. And for that, the state has to assume the responsibility And yes, we can have memory loss, but we have to go farther. I'm talking here about the law, the Zapatero law. In the emission El Objetivo, Ana Pastor made an interview to Zapatero, and she asked him about the new memory law that has just been approved. And he said, it is an important and necessary law. And he said, because both sides suffered a lot. I was devastated when I heard that. I didn't expect it from a kind of statement like that from Zapatero, because he was one of the promoters of the first memory law. But anyways, this memory law, the one in Andalusia and the second one that has been improved, but it is not working, it is not enough. They are not applying this law. And now we have this new law. And yes, we can be happy. This is the result of our work, and we have made so much efforts for this law to be approved. But now we have to keep on following up or controlling that the law is really applied. And we can also try to improve it, because there are missing elements like the amnesty or the reparation. And we do have the mass grave issue as well. We cannot afford to have so many disappeared Spanish nationals, like more than 100,000 people still disappeared in mass graves, or still names of criminals in street names. My uncle, who was executed after a trial, they were very nice to him. You know, I have the documents of the trial, but I would like this sentence to be cancelled, legally cancelled, because I don't want it to be as a valid sentence in the archives of our country. For me, this is important. Despite this trauma and all we have to carry with us, despite this sadness, of course, we have to be honest, we are sad. Because I see people, besides my mother, I see many other people that have this look in their faces, and I can imagine how sad they feel, because they haven't been able to get over this sadness. We can't forgive this. And as Juan Naranjo said at some point, this cannot be reparated. So this is what I had to say. Yes, I found my grandfather and his brother.
Bueno, y para finalizar la mesa, vamos a continuar con...
Well, to close this session, we have Lourdes Farratell Castro. She's a web designer, social media expert, and she gets involved in the memory movement in 2007 when she gets to know a little bit more about her missing grandfather. So she thinks it's necessary to make a review of this narrative about the past, about what has happened in our country, and about all that is not known by the society. Sorry, just one thing. We have 3 catalogs of the Casa de la Memoria. They're for free, or maybe you can give a little donation if you want. We have 3 publications, and feel free to get a copy.
Fuera. Pero ya. A ver, brevemente.
So I'm going to be very brief, but I'd like to start by introducing myself so you can understand a little bit my intervention. I don't have much experience in this movement. I am the granddaughter of a disappeared grandfather. My grandma suffered the oppression of the Franco regime. I discovered this by chance in 2007, and once I get involved in this memory movement, I think I can contribute with my skills because I am a graphic designer. Well, I realized that we have a very dramatic situation here, and is that the story has not been told. So I've been making works for different organizations, and this is the duty I decided to make because I come from a society of silence. My dad never told anything at home. I was born in 75 in an allegedly democracy where everything was supposed to be working properly and fine, but then I discovered a great contrast between what I had learned at school and what the reality was. So I decided this whole story had to be told. And that's what I'm going to tell you about, because from the technical point of view, my colleagues, all the people from this movement know much more than me. So I decided, well, I was invited to participate, and I didn't know what I could do. And I thought, well, I'm going to tell them about the memory and the future, because I think without a memory there is no future. So our starting point is a past that has been manipulated. I'm working from the democratic period onwards. So Franco was a very good friend with the king. This is already a manipulation that we didn't know. We start to talk about this nowadays, but I didn't know before. Here I have pictures of some of our comrades from Madrid, Rebollo. And we have this idea that all this movement is about old people that are always telling the same stories, blah, blah, blah. But I do admire this man. I admire him a lot, and he gives me a lot of energy. He encourages me a lot. We've been together in many meetings. I think he has an excellent energy. He is contagious in this energy. He makes me learn a lot. So these claims of memory are not a new thing. And this is where the conservative parties and the far right have been placing us through history. And then later on, if we don't do anything to change that, because we are always between us and we don't get over our circles, then they're going to think that we're always like this. I've chosen this article from El País, a newspaper. It is from 2015, and they say, the wounds of the memory come back. And they say, we're reopening the wounds based on a lecture made by, on an interpretation made by the far left, and trying to reopen wounds that were already closed thanks to a great effort of the whole of the society many decades ago. And this means a condemnation not to see the future. Still another attempt to show that Spain is not in peace. Well, it is very sad. It is very sad. It is outrageous. We have here the opposites to those words, and it means that us, the memory movement, we are intolerant. We want to promote disagreement. We do not understand. We do not want to be in Spain. We are excluding others. We are making an opposition. But this is just the contrary. We have an anti-fascist narrative. We support the democratic values, humanitarian values. So they think the opposite, but they try to place us in a different position. And it is something that has been more or less accepted by society. What do we have to do? They always say we have to move forward, we have to get over it. But there is a huge contradiction between the truth of what really happened and where they want to place us. This picture is from a comrade, an anthropologist that is working on the project of the mass grave of Seville. It is really shocking. I think my grandfather is here, actually, in that mass grave in the Pico Reja, where Blas Infante could also be buried. So when I learned that, I thought that maybe my grandfather could have been there too, because his location at the time of the execution was the same as the one of Blas Infante. So for me, it was very impressive. I read this article, I emailed the Association of García Marcos. He's an historian that makes a great job about the exhumations in Seville, and he starts talking me about my own grandfather. He knew more about him than I did. And he even had a digital copy of a newspaper of my granddad. So I was so shocked that I got immediately involved, and I've been helping the ones working in Pico Reja. And I give you this example because we know that one of the problems of the memory movement is the lack of youth. We do not teach the memory at schools, and then the young people, they don't know what it is. They don't know what happened.
So they're doing an extraordinary work. They invite many people, they organize visits and everything. And well, here I have these words. At present, we need to tell. There are many bones there, many victims, but there is a present there too. And when there's this narrative about the past is also a present, because it's thanks to the memory movement that this mass grave was opened and excavated. So that's something we have achieved, and we must not forget that. We are that present. So here you have an image and a sentence. This image tells us about the brutality of the past, but it is an image of our present. These people who are there died because they were defending the values, anti-fascist values. They died for democracy and for freedom values that they had, and the other ones came and wanted to take them away from them. But as I just explained earlier, these others are now changing our positioning and making them look as the bad guys, let's say. Here, this is a victim, Angel. He's a wonderful man. And Angel tells us a story of his family. He tells this story to a group of students, and this is creating a future. It's telling the past to create a present with these people and then forward this to the future. I don't know, when I'm older, I will perhaps think that everything is sad, but right now I'm optimistic. And I was discussing earlier with a colleague and a comrade, and I was about the movement, and I said, I believe, yes, it's true. I think it's possible. And this is my daughter, she's older now, and this was in 2019, and that was for the Day of Andalusia, and I was in a protest with a group of people from the memory movement, and Blas Infante The president Moreno was talking about Blas Infante and Lorca, and it was crazy because he's a member of the Popular Party, and I felt really outraged. And, you know, Blas Infante is in a mass grave and we don't know where he is. So please review history and give us the narrative there. So I did this, and then someone came, he was with his Spanish flag, and he said, yes, you're right. And, you know, I convinced him, so that was a great success for me. Here, another example. This is the Guernica painting. We all know it very well. An internationally renowned painting in the Reina Sofia Museum, but they don't say fascism destroyed Guernica, bombed Guernica, and well, this is, you know, something terrible, because we tell this among us and we are not doing this properly. We should tell other peoples about that. We should say it out loud. This is something I designed for, you know, a piece of work that I did, because for me it's important. That was the fascism, right? And look at this. This is an anomaly, right? Here we have the Queen, Letizia. We know that Franco was with the monarchy, and now we have Letizia there taking a picture there, and the person in charge of the press, I mean, it was completely wrong, because also all these people here, they were members of the NATO. And our symbols, if we don't protect them, they're going to be taken away from us. We need to apprehend them. We need to hold them and tell the stories that are there, the history as it is. Here, we see people fleeing from the war, but there's a terrible tragedy. It's the civil population suffering. Like here, the society is ignorant without actually getting to know what we are talking about, what we are demanding. And the La Desbandá was something that happened because these two guys were really close friends. My older daughter, she's here too, and she talks to me a lot about the war in Ukraine, but she knows very well that Franco did terrible things. And she told a friend at school who's 11, well, Franco was a dictator and he killed many things. And the friend said, well, yes, but he also did very good things too. And, you know, this is a problem because she's only 11. Of course, she's learned that from her parents, who must be my age.
Con una patata caliente, mi favorita. Este señor que sabe tanto de todo.
And this is my favorite part. Capo. He knew the media very well with all his interventions. Yes, my time, I'm fine. Well, terror, panic, and so on. This image is already old, from the year 2009. I belong to the Bangoba platform. We want to get Capo's remains and recover the house that he kept for his family. And these are the protests in which we participate. And whenever we do a protest, I always wonder, do they understand when they see this? Because they look at the Macarena, at the church. All these concepts are different for those people. This concept of the assassin, the killer, the criminal. So we use words and expressions that have a great meaning for us, but not for other people who are not aware of that. So what happened then? The law was approved, was passed with, it's not perfect, but I won't go into detail. And then what do you see here? The paper on the 26th of October, Capo de Llano. The brutal statesmen to make the popular front suffer and be afraid by the general who actually made Franco nervous. And people will just read this and believe it without thinking much. And that's the society in which we live. And very quickly now, something we did on the 27th of October, 3 days after Franco left, and our slogan was, and now capo, when Franco was taken away. And I thought that it was a good idea to use these black scarves. And we were there at the door of the Macarena church. And I did this. We did this. It was really cool.
Ah, bueno, pues no pasa nada. No, lo cuento. Hice una...
There's no sound. It doesn't matter. So we did a mix with Capo's words and the Pope Wojtyla's Pope Wojtyla. The Pope Wojtyla is saying words also, and there were the sounds of the bells from the church too, and we did this mix thing. So I'd like to finish.
Que no lo parezca, ¿eh? Mira, que se me va. Es que quiero salir de aquí. Quiero cerrar esto. Por favor, y ya está. Que quiero, para mí es muy importante. Pues ahí, ¿no? ¿Que fallo yo? Es ahí, ¿no? Ah, mira. Ahí está. Eso.
My grandparents, they're always with me. My father couldn't do anything. He ended up in the streets. They had money. I've been stolen my past. We were stolen our home, everything. And they're not going to steal my past from me. Thank you.
A la mesa.
This round table is now closed.